Great, thanks. Well, welcome to my seminar, where I'm going to be discussing the usage of Second Life, which is a virtual metaverse for using it for classroom instruction. So my name's Stephen Gasior, and my background is biology. I teach a non-majors biology course, and I taught this completely in Second Life last summer. And so there's some lessons learned from that experience, but what I want to demonstrate are some of the technologies, some of the utilizations within Second Life I did to teach basic biology and chemistry concepts to students who had no necessary prior knowledge of using Second Life. And then, again, it's structured where I'm going to talk about Second Life, then talk about some of the technologies in Second Life you can use to make a classroom that mimics a real-world classroom and mimics the types of instructions that one can give that's very similar to what in the Second Life parlance is known as the real life. And then discuss some of the things you can do in Second Life that are either difficult or impossible to do in a regular classroom, but both engages the students and provides new avenues for their learning. So let me introduce first on screen one. That is my avatar in Second Life. It's free to make, and it comes from a company known as Second Life. You can visit secondlife.com to download the software, as well as view some of their video tutorials. Now, the way that an avatar works is you can control their movement by just moving the arrow keys so they can walk. You can control camera movement separately. You can also zoom in, zoom out. And then there are other things that avatars can do that are known as gestures. So how you doing? And Mary's here today, so I want you to do a good job for her. Okay, thanks. So again, I personalize him so that he looks a little bit thinner than I do, but in general, in terms of a classroom environment, in an educational setting, people typically choose to have an avatar that closely physically resembles their real life persona, but also you can feel free to do anything. You can feel free to do anything, although I think in terms of one of my points of making this an educational experience for students that's similar to the real world, you would actually not want to come across as a dragon avatar. So now in terms of how an avatar interacts with the universe, there are objects that are scripted, there are objects that are physical. So for example, he cannot walk through the Coke machine. But if I click on this, it actually gives me an object. This is also popcorn. And I can choose to keep these objects. And they show up in something known as my inventory. Since I recently got these objects, I can then choose to wear the object. And in fact, the object, to some degree, takes control of the avatar, so it animates him to be drinking the soda can. Same is also true of the popcorn. So again, one can imagine opportunities, again, which I did not employ in my particular class, where, again, you can have scripted objects that will hand out note cards, hand out objects, also animate avatars as a part of the learning experience. Okay, so he's very happy about drinking the Coke at that point. Again, for my particular avatar, I also got a free expression HUD that allows him to mimic certain human emotions. So right now he's smiling, which again is typical of my classroom behavior. Again, I might laugh. Again, have a much wider open mouth. Again, if a student says some sort of very silly question, of course one would react by being very frightened of why they might think that or disgusted at them. No, just kidding, I would not do that. But again, typical, again, by default, avatars don't have any particular expression, but in order to make, again, more friendly environment and interaction with students, I got one of these to mimic the smiling. Okay, so I have a second avatar where I'll show some of the other interactions one would have with another avatar in the world. What I'm going to do right now, though, is actually set up the classroom environment and show how easy it is to actually have a classroom set up. Now, UNO Island has classrooms that are already set up by default. You can use those. But I also want to demonstrate how easy it is to make your own custom environment. So we have pre-built classrooms from a company called Clever Zebra. And I can res that on the ground. I just drag it from my inventory into the real world. And then again, it's a scripted object, so I click on it. And what I'm going to do is build. There it is. That is a whole pre-built amphitheater. Now, it's not in exactly the right spot, so what I'm going to do is actually reposition it. There. Then again, make sure it's actually close to the ground. Lower it down a little bit. Okay. So there, I have now built a complete classroom where, again, one option students have, like a regular classroom environment, would be to come in, take a seat, and then be able to enjoy the lecture. So any classroom, of course, would not be complete without the ability to present slides and other pictures. So one thing that we have at UNO is a presentation board, which again, you might need to spend a little bit of time placing it in exactly where you want it. Okay. And then I also have, well, I'll show that later. Okay, so again, this will act like a screen where one could normally put a PowerPoint presentation. Now, what I'm going to do is exit Second Life for a second, staying on the same computer. And what I have is a PowerPoint presentation that would be lecture notes, images, whatnot that you might wish to lecture on, like you would in a normal classroom environment. And again, a PowerPoint file is not something that can be directly imported into Second Life, at least as far as I know. So what I'm going to do is save this as a series of images. Okay. And then from there, I'm going to go into Second Life. And upload a bulk set of images. Now, there is a cost associated with uploading images into Second Life, and that is known as 10 lindens. Lindens is a monetary unit in Second Life. 10 lindens is approximately equal to about 3 cents. Okay, so it's going to cost me 12 cents to upload this. Well, it just means that, again, if you are needing that content for class, then depending on how you choose to pay for it, we have a grant here that can, if you have the administrator for that grant, they can upload it for you, so it won't cost you anything. Otherwise, you might ask for a reimbursement from your department. That's what I did last summer. Is I uploaded an entire textbook worth of PowerPoint slides. And so, let me try that again.
I mean, what's the significance of spending your Linden budget so what? I mean, does it come out of your pay?
Yeah, otherwise you'd have to pay for it yourself.
Really? The real money?
Yeah, yeah.
Does your advertising get paid?
Oh, well, again, there are a bunch of servers, and Linden Labs, which owns Second Life, has, I presume, warehouses of servers that have to store that content. Okay, so there's going to be some degree for them, some cost associated with storing that content, and so they charge you for being able to bring stuff into that world. Does that make sense?
It
Well, again, they may not charge you for that, but there probably is some degree of charge associated with that service in which they have revenues that make up for that in some other way. I mean, I don't know the service that you're describing.
It's free. Up to a limit. I mean, you have like 2 gigabytes of storage capacity just for free. The only way they're going to pay is if you want to store more than that.
Okay.
Or even that.
It's a company that in some way or another must have some degree of revenue stream to be able to pay for their costs. So I don't know what that is in that case. Again, Second Life is owned by Linden Labs, so they would have to have, again, this is a way of having revenue stream, but also probably a way that, again, this is largely a consumer product, so they also wouldn't want to have people just uploading, unlimited amounts of data that might, affect their server capacity. I mean, I don't know. I can't really speak to it. But in,
Tell me roughly how Linden's correlate to your money.
yeah, 10 Lindens, each of these slides cost about 3 pennies, 3 American cents. There's an actual exchange rate. If you go to secondlife.com, they can tell you information about the exchange rate.
How much does the whole textbook and stuff cost then?
20 chapters or so, 30 slides per chapter, so 600 slides or so, and that would be $15, $16. And then there's other stuff that I did for this class where I uploaded other textures. So I think the overall cost for the summer course was about $20, which the department reimbursed me for.
And this gives you access to those slides for a period of time? Or forever?
These are in my inventory, so they are now mine to keep. And in fact, I can pass them on to somebody else. I can transfer them to other people.
Can you, if you drop a slide and add a slide, you have to pay it again?
Anytime it's the action of uploading is what the cost is. The action of uploading. So let me go on to show what I do with those slides. So they're uploaded into my inventory, and in order to present, we have these things known as presenter HUDs. So a heads-up display for being able to display these images. And so this is something that comes up as something on the HUD. It's not an in-world object, it's on my display. And this is something that if I edit it, again, I have to be able to put those slides into this. I'm going to take out these default images. And these recent slides, textures I uploaded, I'm going to transfer them and put them inside that object.
Sorry, can I ask another question?
Sure.
Related to this? The images that you uploaded from the textbooks obviously were copyrighted. Do you have a problem with that? Do they have a problem with that?
Well, again, if the educational use of a textbook, to do that in class, you can make reproductions, you can copy that as applicable. Again,
It's the same thing
yeah.
from a copyright.
Yeah, it'd be like, again, if I download their images onto my computer from PowerPoint and then project those PowerPoints in a classroom, that's not copyright infringement. If I were to turn that into a commercial use on myself, then that would be copyright infringement. Okay, so again, when I clicked the UNO board over here, it presented this dialog box asking me if I wish to control that presentation board. And I'm going to say yes. And now my HUD contains the images I just uploaded, including this initial presentation one.
What's your HUD?
Again, the HUD is this thing on the monitor right down here. It controls the presentation. Now let me show a couple other features in the world of how I would get a classroom set up for student instruction. And that is, if I click here the information, again this toolbar at the top says University of New Orleans, so it's identifying the land where my avatar currently is. And I have some administrative access to this. You know what, I'm going to have to get rid of that. Okay. I accidentally built my classroom in the middle of a fan, which I had forgotten was there. Yeah. Okay, so if I click on that little eye, on the right side in the dashboard, it presents more information about that land, its overall profile. And you see its owner is Labor Maintenance, which is Louisiana Board of Regents managing group in Second Life for that land. Now, if I click on About Land, then it pulls up certain tabs, an option here in the top left, that includes sound, media, as well as other options. So what I have done is put in, for the sound, this address, which is media that I'm going to stream from a separate computer. And then here is other media, which is also media that I can stream from a server. Again, an actual web server, whereas the sound I'm using different technology, which I'll talk about in just a second. Okay, so once I have a server set up and those settings, I'm able and ready to give a class. So what I want to do real quickly before I demonstrate that is go to the other screen and show how simple it is to set up a server to deliver that media. Okay, so on my Mac, no, you just have to have a web server or the software that enables the streaming. So, and those are they're cross-platform solutions for all of those. Now, on the Mac, if I want to have a web server, all I have to do is go into Preferences, go into Sharing, and turn on Personal Web Sharing. Now, in terms of applications for Second Life, there's a specific way I'm doing this, a particular type of media that I'm streaming. It's not, again, a fully enabled web server within Second Life. And then what that does is it says my address can be viewed at the address listed there. And I also have a personal website that also includes my directory information on the computer. Okay. Now, what's important for that is in the Finder on a Mac, there's a particular folder in one's home directory known as Sites. So you can see the word Sites there, that's highlighted, and that's where I have some video and audio media that the web server will be delivering. Again, notice the names. You see the word sound.mp4 as well as makingsalt.mp4, properties of water mp3. Okay, now the other software that I'd like to set up partly uses iTunes. Okay, so in iTunes, I have MP3s that are from, again, a lecture that I gave, but also MP3s that came from the textbook publisher. So the textbook I use for this course is Essential Biology 4th edition, Campbell's Essential Biology 4th edition by Pearson. And they also have associated instructor material that includes MP3s as well as some of the videos I'm going to show. Okay, so again, iTunes is up and ready and able to start playing that as if you'd be playing it and listening to it on your computer. But instead of playing it on my computer, I'm going to use a program available for the Mac called Nicecast, which takes advantage of a streaming technology known as Icecast. Nicecast, in this case, is the name of the software by a company known as Rogue Amoeba. Again, this is something I purchased separately, but if I tell it to start broadcasting, it'll quit iTunes and relaunch it. It will take the audio output of whatever program you select. Whatever program you select, instead of just playing it to your speakers, it'll then stream that over the internet. So again, I'm not going to start the playing yet, but that's something I would have set up in order to start playing that for a class. Okay. Now there's one last technology I want to show that's not strictly related to teaching a Second Life, but that occasionally students might miss class, or again, you might do this in a regular classroom, which would be to audio record your lecture. So there's a freeware program known as Audacity that allows you to record yourself. And this is, I'm just going to show, I hit the record button. It shows the progress, the amplitude of my voice coming through the microphone. And then at the end of the lecture, I could then stop that and export it as that day's lecture and post that to Blackboard or have it available as an archive to record what I said. Okay, and I'm just going to otherwise close that program because we're not going to show it anymore. Okay, so I'm going to exit Second Life using this avatar and then give you the perspective of trying to get a student into the Second Life, into the classroom, and being able to monitor that media. The avatar I'm going to use is one that our department secretary set up, but is otherwise a clean avatar account with very minimal additions to it. But I'm also going to go back and log in as my avatar on my computer. I don't know where she came up with the name, but it's Floridora Pearl. Okay. Now again, in terms of setting up an avatar, we'll have a creation workshop for that afterwards. It's really as simple as going to Second Life's website, secondlife.com, and going to the web page, assign an avatar, and you just fill out some forms. You give them an email address, and essentially you're ready to go. Okay, so this might be the experience you would have as a student, first logging in, not exactly knowing where you'd expect to be. Now again, in order to help the students navigate to the right spot, what I did in the syllabus for the course, which is on screen 1, on screen 1, is I included what's known as a slurl, which is a Second Life Universal Resource Locator, where if they just, in the PDF viewing program, just click on this, it'll take them into a web browser, and then essentially click Teleport Now, and then go back to Second Life, and you're given the option to teleport to that address. Okay, great. So again, I would expect the students to be around the classroom at that slurl at a particular time. Because again, one thing to keep in mind about students that I had for this course, they were actually still signing up after the course began. So there was no workshops. I had to be able to get them to the right spot and come by. So from here, one of the options in the dashboard is something known as people. And that includes people that are nearby, friends that you have, your groups, as well as recent communications you've had. So again, the nearby, I'm showing up. And again, what I would also do on my computer on screen 2 would be to pull up what's known as a mini map, where again, other dots represent other avatars in the world. I can recognize that somebody is there. And I can come up and start communicating with that student. Now, again, in theory, students would typically be able to start using voice communication right away. So let me get that set up on screen 2, demonstrating again. Well, let me move her out of the way. Okay, not as much background. Okay, so voice communication should work pretty straightforward. I'm going to turn off the microphone on me, and you'll hear the output coming from the PC, which you can imagine is you being the student as you look at screen 1. Okay, so that's, say, hi Floridora, are you here for contemporary biology? And hopefully they'd say, yes. Now what she just responded with is between the students, between me and the students, and that's actually how I deliver the majority of the lectures. Okay, so again, but one thing that can be tricky about it is that voice doesn't always work for some students, and at least not initially set up on their computer to work correctly. Okay. Let me turn this back on. Okay, so one indication that voice is working is the green bars that are above my avatar's head, both from her perspective and my perspective. So one of the first actions I would do with the students that are coming in, I'm going to turn off this mic so you're not hearing everything twice, is I would invite her to the class group. So within Second Life, you can set up groups, much like you would in, say, Facebook or in Blackboard, group invites. And again, what I had set up was a group for the class known as Contemporary Biology at UNO. I'll send an invitation, and she has a dialog box that pops up saying, do you wish to join? And the answer is yes. And now again, she is now in that group, so I can effectively communicate with her in ways kind of like you would with students with Blackboard, communicating to a lot of students at one time. And also to deliver objects from inside the classroom. So what again, I would tell the students, let's go on inside the classroom, which again I've set up actually over here. So again, there's no damage that occurs to avatars unless one sets that up in the program. So there's a nasty fall, but she's all right. So again, she would come in. Again, I would instruct her to right-click or just, again, look at the chair icon that pops up and have a seat in class. And again, her ability to view the classroom contents, she can move her camera around so that she has a good view of the presentation board. And I'll move my avatar in place to be at the front of the lecture. Like that. Okay, so again, what I could do in this situation is then turn on my microphone and be able to deliver the class content. Again, in my particular classroom, I use voice to lecture like I might in a regular classroom to talk about slides that are being presented. So if you guys just imagine that you're sitting in this classroom, you'd be listening to, again, a lecture I might be giving, or perhaps a seminar. So again, I'd be talking about delivering biology course content in the virtual classroom. And I can advance to the next slide. Again, what you would see on your screen is actually the next slide. Okay, so now again, what I had taken was an image ahead of time of my teaching and say, okay, well, here is an example of a virtual classroom. This is my avatar. And there are certain people I'd like to acknowledge as being helpful in presenting this seminar, one of whom would be Michael Adler, Assistant Director of Instructional Media and Technology. You saw him walking by earlier. Again, so this room is set up in a way to record seminars, lectures, special events, and they also have the ability to, again, host media on web servers that you can then access at a later time. So again, for convenience sake, I'm going to turn off the microphone. This is occurring at the same time. Okay. Again, other people to thank in terms of helping set up Second Life at the University of New Orleans and LeBour Regents, and there's a grant that they got called SELECT, is Merrill Johnson, who's in academic affairs and a professor of geography and has used Second Life in the classroom. There's also Lindsay Hamlin, who's the director of distance and non-credit learning and has been has helped coordinate the execution of that grant to set up Second Life. And then Autumn Hobson was a student whose salary was paid for on that grant and was very helpful at getting me set up using Second Life, as well as the classroom that I used. And then, again, another faculty at UNO who, again, has so much going on in terms of online and internet content. He gets his own slide to represent all different ways of contacting him. But that's Richard Speaker, who's in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. Okay, so that would be, again, a self-referential presentation within a presentation. I thought it was very, very clever. But anyway, again, what I had in my classroom experience, again, if you'll just quickly look at screen 2, is over the course of the semester, I could load up different chapters with different textures. And so for chapter 16, you see all those slides in terms of the textures, and then also another presentation HUD. In that folder. Again, when I wanted to change chapters, I would just wear the new heads-up display, and then it would start typically at the first slide or somewhere else in the slide. Again, I would just say, project this image onto that presentation board, and then I'd be able to lecture on that content. Okay, so again, in a sense, that recreates a normal classroom environment that, again, is something very similar to what you'd have in the real world, lecturing with a set of PowerPoint presentations. Again, I would be using my voice to discuss that. And in general, typically had asked the students to not enable their voice, so that would not interfere with my lecture content. Now, if they had any questions, or if they were unclear with the material or wanted to have other class discussion, then as I was lecturing, they could simply type in local chat maybe a question like, what was that middle part again? And that would pop up to everybody in the classroom as well as myself, and then I could address that to the class. Again, that was something that local chat did not interfere with my ability to voice the lecture. So again, if you had students actually talking in class, that might, again, be rather disruptive to the classroom environment. But in this case, both I and other students could see some sort of common question. And then there's another way of communicating in Second Life, which is known as an instant message. So again, instant message technology is a one-way communication between two different individuals. And so the student in this case, say they were embarrassed about the question, they thought it was a stupid question. If they right-click, again, this is being displayed on screen 1, they could right-click and select I am. Again, as long as they're clicking on my avatar, and say, a message to me. And now what you'll see on screen 2 is there's a little button that pops up and says, I am received. And I could take a quick look at that, and her question would be visible to me and only me. Again, so that'd be if a student felt embarrassed about asking a question, they can have a direct communication, and then I could choose within voice to address that either as an overall class question, or I might even, while I'm lecturing, say that we'll talk about it after class. And of course, they would understand that ATER actually meant after in that case. So again, that's an instant message that would pop back up to the student. Where again, if we go back to screen 1, oh shoot, I just lost. Where again, that instant message would pop up, and they'd be able to look at that. Go back to I am. So again, her dialog box, the reply from Stephen Zootfly was, talk about after class. So again, enable certain types of communications.
While you're lecturing?
Yeah. Again, what I typically say is try and type back a communication when I'm pausing during the lecture, because I find it very hard to talk and I am at the same time. It's really hard. But again, typically what happened was students were just embarrassed to ask a question that I thought was a good question to ask. Again, it alerts me that one person thought it was unclear, and for me the assumption is that that'll be unclear to at least a few other students as well.
So you basically, if you're in the middle of your lecture and one of these pops up, you stop, you read it, you make a determination, you either respond or you don't, and then you go back to lecturing again.
Well, again, for IMs, if I'm just reading an IM real quick, I can get a sense of what it needs to be without interrupting my actual talking. Like I'd say, oh, she's saying it's something like this, like, oh, okay, I'll go on and, in theory, the students wouldn't know I received an IM. I was usually, again, as one gets practiced at it, that's usually okay. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question in terms? Okay.
If you ask for questions and you get several at a time, are they in sequence or what?
Well, yeah, in local chat, they'll be in sequence. And so, again, if we go to, let's stay on the PC screen. I can look at the chat history that was just up there. And so that's all time-stamped and tagged, and I can keep an eye on when they asked a question. And that's actually also another convenient way for taking attendance. Okay, that what I actually asked my students to do at the beginning of class, once my avatar appeared, and thus I could actually read local chats, I asked my students to all say, here. And then what would happen is on my computer, I would be able to open up that local chat log. Again, all the information that's coming on here is present as text files. So if we go to, well, don't go to screen 2 yet. Let me check something first. I'm trying to not. Okay, so if you go to screen 2, you'll actually see a text file that is my local chat. It's going to keep a log of all the text that is occurring in the world. And if I open up that chat box, then you'll see a log of all that information. And so in fact, that very last line, where I had the student say here, is time-stamped, and the only way to get that here in the chat log was for the student to actually type it in. So again, it enforces the idea that the students are present and actually making those contributions. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of delivering content to the students, that is multimedia oriented. Okay. There's some great new ways of doing this in version 2 of Second Life. But in the first version, which is what I'm limited to using with on my laptop, there are kind of particular ways you have to set up that multimedia delivery. So one thing is to actually have an object in world that plays media. Okay, so I have a basic media board. I'm not going to go through all the specifics of how one sets one of these up to work correctly. But this media board is set up to play the information that's on that web server. Okay, so from the perspective of the student, again, what I had in the, again, if you go to screen 2, in the media portion, I asked for it to play a sound file, an MP3 called Properties of Water. Okay, and then when the student comes in and clicks on that, it's the little play button comes up. Okay, so I had to hit the play button on the top right. Okay, for some reason it's not.
The volume's all the way down, I think.
On what? No, that's there's a little button there at the bottom to get to the preferences. let's just stop that.
If you're doing something like this in the middle of the class, the students see all of this navigation going on.
No, what the students would have been seeing, like you saw on screen 1, was an object has resed, and then they have the ability to click on it and in theory play the media, which is, for whatever reason, not working this time. Now let me go to a different one. Which is actually being delivered by a computer in my office. And what I'm going to do is turn off the audio stream. Oh, you know what? Yeah, let's turn off the audio stream. Blank that out. Okay. This is an MP4 that talks about photosynthesis. Okay.
Plants provide us with food to eat and oxygen to breathe. They perform this amazing feat by the
so make sure
process
you're
of
on,
photosynthesis.
screen 1.
Let's
Again,
take
this
a
would be the
closer
student's
look.
perspective of having
Photosynthesis
that
requires
media.
carbon dioxide,
Now, one thing that I'll show
which
for people
diffuses
here in the
into the leaf
classroom
through small pores
is if I try and play that media
and then enters the
as
cells.
a professor, you'll notice that
Inside
it's
the
starting
cell,
from the beginning.
Carbon dioxide diffuses into the chloroplasts,
So those
where
files
photosynthesis
are
takes
asynchronous.
place.
Again, as any
Chloroplasts
individual
use
avatar
energy
clicks on
from
it,
light to transform carbon dioxide
that's
and
when it
water
starts for
into
them.
sugar and oxygen.
Okay, so it's not, it's something where
Zooming into
if you have a
chloroplast,
video
we
that
see
you wish
these
for the
flattened
students to
membranous
watch
sacs called
and then
thylakoids.
do a report on,
Here,
that's convenient
that
that way
energy
that
is
they can start it
converted
at their
to
own
chemical
time,
energy
watch
in
it
the
as many
first phase of
times as they
photosynthesis.
wish. And that was also true for the MP3 coming through media this way. That would be an example where as any student clicks on it, their media would start, they would locally be able to listen to it, and then watch it that way. Now, what I'm going to do is go back to the island, and I'm going to just blank. Oh, let me show one other thing is that you can stream media that everybody sees at the same time. That's, in other words, synchronous. Now, I don't have a server set up to do that, although one can use software known as Darwin Streaming Server and set that up on, again, cross-platform. It's something made by Apple, which is their underlying technology for QuickTime streaming broadcast. Okay, so again, what I've done on computer 2 is change the settings to a website known as America Free TV that has several genres of what are essentially public media. Now, in this case, I have it set to a public science fiction media. And now, again, from the student perspective on screen 1, when they click on that, there'll be some delay, but they're now watching this movie that's being streamed from an outside server. And for those of you in class, again, if I click on my avatar on screen 2 and start the media playing, you will see that we're actually seeing that synchronously at the same time. So if you have control of your own streaming server, then you can all locally watch the same content at the same time. And that way, if you wanted to have a classroom discussion, like why is she walking away? What is she doing? Then I can locally, what? I have no idea. It's complicated. You know, we'll discuss it at the end of class. So again, going back to screen 1, that's something where, again, you can have all a common experience environment because it's being done synchronously. But it also means you have to be set up to actually enable that software as well. Now let me go back to the audio stream. Okay, so remember before I was showing you that I had my computer set up to stream audio from iTunes using a software known as Nicecast. So I'm actually going to demonstrate this now, where in the audio tab I'll set up that address. And again, I'll blank this out here so it's not interfering. And on screen 2, on my Mac, again, I'll say OK. If I hit start the I'll start the broadcast, and then in iTunes, start playing the media. And I'm going to skip ahead to, again, this comes from a textbook called Basic Energy Concepts, that now the student
Today's
should be able
topic
to
is
hear and
energy.
listen to that content.
Our society's economic well-being is dependent upon reliable and affordable supplies of energy.
Can you hear that in the room? Again, that's not me. That's not the computer playing iTunes. That is my iTunes library being streamed to Second Life in to the student's computer. Yeah, I don't know. Let me check the sound settings real quick.
Processing and consuming energy is job one for the cell. For this reason, a basic understanding of energy concepts is essential to understanding how life works. In this MP,
So again, that's
I will
a way of delivering
1.
media,
Define
where again,
energy.
I would be hearing the same thing at the same
2.
time with my avatar. All the
Describe
students would be
some
hearing the same
basic
thing at the
energy
same
properties.
time and could have a classroom discussion in local chats, or I could discuss it at the end of everybody listening to that particular file.
We all know what energy is. Or do
So again, ways of playing media both synchronously and asynchronously within the classroom environment. Okay. Now, this is kind of recreating a normal classroom environment. What one can also do is use Second Life to, in ways that you otherwise really couldn't do so well in class. So what I created to teach some of the chemistry components, I'm on the wrong computer. Again, let's go to computer screen 2 with the Mac. Is I created objects in World. Now these didn't cost me anything. If you actually want to just create content in World using their creation tools, that is free. It's only when you upload stuff into the World that it costs money. And so, oops, wrong. What I'm giving her are objects that contain other useful information, objects that she can manipulate in World. So I'm going to have Floridora stand up. And I'm going to go back to my home. Oh, actually, let me demonstrate one thing on screen 1 first, which is that for the students who want to just use Second Life, come to the classroom, get the lecture, and then start out in the classroom, you can actually set their home to that location. And so again, we need to enable that for our particular island, but the students can basically log in, and it's very easy to get their avatar to the classroom environment. Although typically, once they log off, they will typically go back to the location at which they were and just come back to that same one. So again, it's very easy for the students to navigate back and forth from where they need to be to just at least come to class. So again, I'm going to take my avatar home. Again, on the right screen, on screen 2, I just go teleport home, which is right outside my classroom. I'm going to go back to local chat to find Floridora. I'm going to offer her a teleport. And then going back to screen 1, I'm offering her a teleport. Just click yes. And then again, she is right there back in my local vicinity. Okay. So the objects that I gave her, again, look in recent inventory, is called elements, balls, and sticks. Okay, and these, what she would do, and what the students, I actually had the students do this assessment in my class. She would res that, then click on it, and a dialog box would come up and give her the option to copy all the contents to her inventory. Res it, yeah. Resing means to bring it from inventory to an object that's in world that people can all see and again interact with. Now, what was in that were objects that I made that represent elements like oxygen, nitrogen, and I included floating text on them so the students could remember that, although, again, most chemists or biologists would instantly recognize the color codings. Again, carbon. Again, these were just elements most represented by, or that represent the majority of the chemistry that goes on in biology. Okay. Again, so for anyone who's who remembers doing chemistry in class, again, what one might have are little tinker toy models where you construct those together according to, again, the molecules you're trying to make that underlie, where the underlying chemistry allows you to know how they're supposed to be constructed. Now, what the students would do is have to edit and manipulate these objects in the real world. So if I wanted to have a bond between the carbon molecule and the hydrogen, I could represent it in world that way. Okay. So I'm only going to just preview this, that one can create objects that students manipulate that reflect and can help reinforce the rules and the learning objects in terms of, at least for a biology class, teaching them how to construct molecules can help reinforce what the properties of those molecules are and how they're important for biological systems. Now, again, I want to demonstrate the use of a group in Second Life because there were other objects that I made for the students that they were supposed to use. So actually, if you look on screen 2, I just got an IM from Merrill Johnson, who apparently is in Arizona at the moment. But again, just respond to him. His avatar is not close to me. His avatar and I were contacts. He has ways to find me in world. So I am something that works across the entire Second Life universe. And he can contact me. Of course, doesn't know, or maybe doesn't know that I'm currently in the middle of actually giving the lecture. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is go to my groups, and this is still on screen 2. And go to the information for my classroom group. And one of the tabs is notices. Okay, so one can send out group notices, and I'm going to create a new notice. I'll say element holder. This is for class. And then from my inventory, I'm going to select my elements with valence shells holder. Okay, now that's in there. I will send the notice. And then if you go to screen 1, the students, there's a dialog box that pops up and says, you've received this element holder, and you say OK. And then in her recent inventory, it did not. I think I was supposed to actually click on the object. Let me do that again. Okay, so now if I actually click on the object itself, there we go, that the attachment is saved. And now she has a second set of objects that I used where, again, she reses the holder on the ground, clicks on it, and copies all these objects to her folder. Okay, so again, this is a way now she has all these valence shells where, again, these are things that represent chemistry and the ability to, again, make molecules from using valence shells that teaches some of the rules about how molecules come together in terms of the interactions of their electrons. So again, I'm not going to go through all the demonstration of that, but I had the students and actually assessed their ability to perform this chemistry as an assessment. And one of the nice advantages of Second Life is that there are built-in tools for screen capture of what's going on in the world. So what I'm just going to show very quickly on computer 1 is this little camera in the dialog box at the bottom. You hit Take Snapshot, shows you the image that it wishes to save, and then you can, again, save it to your hard drive, and that doesn't cost you anything. Okay, so just hit Save. I'll just save it like that. So again, I was able to document what the students had done by taking screen captures after I essentially told them the assessment was complete and done. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to just quickly demonstrate, and I'm actually going to log as in a Steven Zoot fly on this computer. Well, actually, let me show you one more thing first. Under the People tab, she now has My Groups. Okay? If she goes to the group info, the group profile, she gets information about all the students that are in that group, whether they are currently online or not, and then also is able to pull up their profiles or IM people within that list. So again, the profiles are being done in a slightly new way in Viewer 2. But she would be able to interact and contact me. And again, it shows that I'm not currently online. Because one thing I didn't do was actually friend all my students in Second Life as actual direct contacts. Okay, so I'm going to exit there. Again, the last really powerful and neat tool for using Second Life is the ability to take field trips. Okay, so Second Life, there are lots of people building both educational as well as entertainment and leisure islands and content. Again, live music performances is something that is one of the more popular activities in Second Life. So again, you can give students opportunities to see live music, again, a streamcast, or again, music that is, again, being done in a studio. As long as you have a streaming server, and as long as that's being sent to that parcel, then the students can listen and, again, have a local text chat and talk about it. So in my landmarks, I'm just going to go to one place really quickly, known as, again, I actually have it in a folder called Class Field Trips. Where this is an island under the that was built by an avatar known as Max Chatnoir. And what she actually made was kind of an interactive display and recreation of Mendel's Abbey. So again, Mendel was the one who helped develop principles of heredity. That again is a class topic in class. Then also she has these demonstration and interactive objects that also illustrate certain principles of genetics. So what she actually shows here are parental flowers that are both short, one that's short and white, one that's tall and pink. And then those had an F1 generation, in which the F1 generation here, all of them were tall and white. And then what would you expect to see if you took those F1 generation plants and bred them with each other? And again, if you click on the progeny here in the plot, again, following some sort of mathematical script, it recreates the idea that both tall to short, you'll get 3 tall progeny for every 1 short, and you'll get 3 red progeny for every 1 white progeny. Again, illustrating interactively. Again, this is generating data where the students could take that text information and then again, do some sort of class report or project. And then around the Abbey, there's some other examples of genetics that she has illustrated here, where again, one can actually recreate what a test cross would look like. So again, clicking on these objects and performing test cross, where again, it's asking you to analyze the genotypes of what the parents must have been based on the progeny you're getting just by clicking on these objects. And then also an example, another type of non-Mendelian genetics, something known as incomplete dominance, where again, the actual objects reflect phenotypes that you would see. There's underlying genotypes in the objects, and then you click on it. And again, you're not getting the exact ratios, you're getting probably randomly generated numbers that reflect the proper numbers you'd get from those genetic inheritance patterns. So again, the ability to take field trips is very powerful. I actually had there's another site that recently went down that was a recreation of Darwin's travels, where some of the objects that a person got were, you actually went from site to site. And it actually filled out a notebook for you as you went from site to site. Now this was a HUD, a heads-up display, where again the content inside this heads-up display were recreations of Darwin's notes from his travels in going to, again, both the Galapagos Islands and South America. And the way that this HUD got filled up was by completing certain tasks inside Second Life. And so again, it was an interactive display where you could get actual scientific educational information by performing certain tasks where you were pretty well guided through those individual tasks. I will say that I tried to guide my students through this, and it was a big disaster. It would have been useful to have had TAs that could be at each station so the students knew how to go and had instruction. I was trying to guide 30 students or 22 students all at once through that. Not a good idea, but if you had more TAs or again, a much more set of tutorial notes ahead of time, then that would have worked out a little bit better, I think. Anyway, so again, hopefully I've convinced you that Second Life is a useful environment for recreating a classroom, a real-world classroom, and can deliver educational content to that. There are also tools that allow you to interact with students that I think can make them more comfortable in terms of interacting with you as their instructor. But also there are enabling technologies in Second Life, the ability to create your own content. It has its own scripting language, so you can create not just objects that students have to manipulate, but ones that interact with them. And then the ability to take advantage of community content in which, again, you can have students go on field trips and interact with the information there that's, again, related in this case to genetics, but it could be, again, any other type of educational content like an art museum or whatnot. So anyway, thanks for listening. Again, I'd like to thank Micah Adler for providing and recording the seminar. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and we can keep the cameras rolling for this first part.
I think you mentioned before you started your lecture that there were things that you learned in the course of doing a Second Life course. And I wonder if you could share one or two of those things with us. I mean, what did you learn as a lecturer that you didn't know going into your first Second Life experience?
I kind of obliquely referred to that actually, which is that you can have students sign up for a class a day or two after the term has started, not even knowing what Second Life is and wanting to take the course. So one thing that was really important that I tried to set up was lots of workshops ahead of time for students to come and take it. But I was really surprised that there were lots of students who never even heard of Second Life. And so I think there's, again, on campus, there's a little bit of a marketing, again, across campuses, a marketing push that one has to make to get students, one, familiar with what it is, then actually using it. Because that's the thing that it took more time than I thought to get students acquainted with the editing tools. Again, I was able to move objects around. In order to get students to appreciate how to do that, that took a lot of work. and it actually took up a lot of instructional time in class. I thought it was worth it for the chemistry. Chemistry is really important in terms of what I wanted them to be able to take away and understand from it. So that was worthwhile. But I was a bit surprised at that. Now, in terms of lecturing style, I felt like I had done this lecture before. And I have to admit, I really liked using a chalkboard. Again, to go up there and just talk about how molecules come together, to draw examples of biological pathways like the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. I like to be able to freehand that and describe that as I'm going with interactions from students asking questions. So there are some styles you have to change a little bit. You don't have a blackboard available per se in Second Life, at least when I taught it. You're stuck with the images you've uploaded. And you can't just... There are some Blackboard type technologies that I've seen in Second Life, but I don't have any personal familiarity with them. I should mention, I have not done an exhaustive study of all the teaching tools in Second Life. And so there are educational communities, chat boards, email lists, lots of other community users where they might know a good solution for something where I just don't have the experience with it.
Did you get feedback from your students? Was it built into it so you could basically learn from your students' experiences?
No. What we did were the standard course evaluations.
But nothing specific to your class?
Yeah, I knew they were going to be done online, and I thought I'd get a notice from the testing services saying, are there any specific questions you want to ask? And then next thing I know, I said, well, again, I'm going to try and put some custom questions in to you guys for class for the online evaluation. You should get an email about it. And they're like, oh, we already filled them out. It's like, oh, So again, let me continue. There is this Richard Speaker used SurveyMonkey. There's a website called SurveyMonkey where you can make your own custom surveys, and we did follow up and email that to students. I haven't talked to Richard about what the results were, but I had forwarded that to my students to see what they thought, where he had questions specific to the Second Life classroom environment.
I was just going to say, what about informally? Students texting you or emailing you or contacting you in some way about things they liked or things they didn't like or things that didn't work?
Well, in terms of the course evaluations, there is the place where they can freehand any sort of comment they want. They can just type in their comments. And they all enthusiastically liked using Second Life as an online classroom. I got very high evaluations, very good comments about how they enjoyed it, that they enjoyed the material. There were a few comments where they said, oh, the ability to manipulate objects in Second Life was a barrier to my learning it. Because I think in terms of the time constraints of learning how to move those objects around, that could be difficult. And so I understand that. Again, I put together some video tutorials that I did screen capture of my doing that. For this upcoming semester, since we have the ability to screen capture whatever you're doing on a computer, I can go back and make really nice high resolution, I've done them once before, video tutorials to help the students do that ahead of time and make sure that they're viewing those. Again, one thing that surprised me about the course here was that UNO has a lot of students that are very regional. So for the summer they go home and they're 2-3 hours away, but they still want to take a summer course. And so the ability to deliver this class, even though it was a synchronous class, so it wasn't where I give them assignments and meet with them later. There were students who were in Mississippi, students in northern part of Louisiana, one student who's in Boston who took the course, and that worked out very nicely. So I think there's a market there for regional students to take summer courses that are being delivered, in particular, this way.
Especially if they're in the same time zone.
Yeah, same time zone helps. Again, one thing about Second Life is they have their own Second Life time zone, which is really just Pacific time. But you have to be very careful about those communications. So I said for my class, it's Central Time. Well, I'll always tell you where to be in Central Time.
How did you do with testing and stuff?
Sorry?
How did you do with testing, assessments, etc.?
Well, there were only 2 in-world assessments. The first one was the chemistry objects, where I took screen captures and how close were they to the actual chemistry. The other one that I did it was a combination of in-world and out-of-world, where I asked the students to build, again, I gave them a template information, but asked them to describe an animal, its phylogeny, geographic distribution, interesting facts about it. Now, what was useful about this particular assessment that I thought was to try and engage students was that I gave them extra credit if they also found an avatar that reflected what animal they were doing. Okay, so again, this student had a hippopotamus as her animal she decided to describe, and then also for free, there was a hippopotamus avatar that, again, there's a little bit of a transition time in terms of loading it up, but again, she presented her poster as a hippopotamus herself. Again, there was another student who did, where's delete? Who did a jellyfish. And again, there's also, you can see that in the back over here. Again, this poster was about a jellyfish, and so she had the opportunity to earn extra credit by actually showing up as a jellyfish. Okay, so again, try to engage the imagination and use some of the tools in the world. Now, they didn't have to only do it as an avatar. Again, this student was a real big fan of the Galapagos green turtle. And so as long as you had something that took advantage of Second Life, again, there's a fishing application in Second Life called 7 Seas. And so you actually have casting rods and you pull up virtual animals. And so one thing I have here is a Second Life green sea turtle, which I should be able to just wear, but it's not showing up. See, it says it's swimming around me happily, but I don't see it. Oh, you know what? I see bubbles. I think it's beneath me. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so there it is. Okay, so again, there are objects in world where, again, you can represent anything you want. Again, they got extra credit for finding or utilizing these types of things that not only represent, or that help represent their animal on their poster. And what I actually did is I made that community event. I sent out invitations for anybody in science groups or biology groups to come help judge the posters. Come help judge, come see what the students are doing, interact with them with voice, and then give me feedback on how well the students did. So again, that worked out pretty well. It was kind of a fun community event, and I thought it worked out pretty well. Yeah.
Coming back to the budget business, I mean, when you're teaching the class, are you given a budget of lindens that you can use, or how do you know whether you've exceeded your budget? I mean, what?
Well, again, that's something I worked out with my department chair. I said, I'm going to need, probably about no more than $50 to be able to upload content into Second Life, and then kind of get reimbursed for that as long as I keep track of it. And she said, that's fine. And one thing that's nice is that all the monetary transactions one makes in Second Life, you can go to Second Life's website and download that as an XML. So I was able to document, and I said, this is what these expenditures were for, this is a spreadsheet of my expenditures, and this is how much the exchange of lindens for real-world dollars cost. Yeah, so it was just a matter of getting reimbursed from the department from departmental funds for instruction.
Puts the money up front and then it gets reimbursed by the
Yes.
department.
Yeah, I
The
did.
department must give you some idea at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of your class what your limits are.
Yeah, well, I think $50 was something that we covered pretty easily in terms of getting that reimbursement done. Again, I can't imagine, again, uploading, you have to upload something like 10,000 files and have that be like 100,000 lindens for that to be a significant monetary expenditure. Again, it's like, in terms of class, it's like buying a couple boxes of chalk or just markers. Like office supplies cost a whole lot more than all the class content that I did for a whole summer's course. And then once I have it in Second Life, I can share it with other people. That again, if someone else is going to deliver this course, instead of their having to re-upload everything, I could just transfer it from my avatar to their avatar, and that's free.
So how How does Second Life make its money, actually?
I'm not familiar with the overall revenue stream of Second Life. I will say that what they make you pay for is uploading content. They make you pay for the land. So not only do you have an upfront payment of, I think, a few $1,000s to have an island, but then you also have a subscription cost to maintain it. Okay, so they earn money by essentially selling. They're in the real estate business. They're in their own real estate business. And again, a lot of those islands actually represent computing powers. I think it's like one server per island type of thing. So again, that subscription rate's pretty reasonable. And
UNO pays that. UNO pays for the island.
well, yeah, there's a grant, the select grants, where I think Richard and Merrill were the co-PIs. That's a grant that came from the federal government that was to help set up all these different islands. Actually, that's one thing I can show real quick, is in the world, if you look at the map from an overhead view, we are adjacent to, again, there's New Orleans Island, Louisiana Regents, there's a Delgado Island, Tulane, Loyola, ULM, Southeastern, Suno, and then ULM has 2 islands. So again, this is coming out of that select grant, but it's an upfront cost and a subscription. Then last thing is that individual users can subscribe to Second Life or have membership. And that enables them to buy land. They don't necessarily have to have land, but it enables them to buy land, and there's like a monthly cost for that as well. So that's another revenue stream that they do have.
Your students don't have to pay.
No, again, in terms of students, students pay nothing to have an avatar and then to use Second Life and to come to the classroom environments. There's no costs for the no additional cost for the students. Unless you make them do things on field trips or buy stuff where they would have to do that. Again, some of the avatars had a very nominal cost to them, like 5 or 10 linden. Well, you can spend a lot of money on an avatar if you really want. But I said, you can spend whatever you want. So some got free, and some were like 5 linden. So in order to earn just that 5 linden, there are ways to earn like 1 linden at a time if you do these like little lottery things in World. So a couple students did that. They did these like little, what are called lucky chairs, and they got 1 linden every time their letter came up for their name. And so they did that over about a 20-minute span of time, got 5 linden, bought their avatar. But
On these field trips, do you have, as the instructor, do you have an opportunity to tour them to see which one you'd like to incorporate without paying for it?
oh, certainly, yeah. So the one we went on a field trip to, she is a professor at, I want to say, Wesleyan College in Texas. And so I don't know how she is paying for or setting that up, but she doesn't have any sort of cost for visiting her island. Again, very few places have a cost associated with visiting another location in Second Life. So yeah, I went there for free. I happened to run into her because I'd heard about the island. I was touring it, flying around, and then I ran into her. We started chatting, and again, I got permission from her. I let her know that I was going to stop by today, this afternoon, to show her place off.
How do you spend a lot of money on Avatar?
How? Well, yeah, if you buy, again, there's a whole economy to Second Life. So my ability to create content and upload textures means I can make clothes. And then if I want, I could sell the clothes to other people. I could make them pay to have a copy of my clothes in their inventory. And so, or again, there's other games, role-playing games that you can do in Second Life, where again, if you want to buy a sword that's specific to that role-play environment, you have to spend lindens to buy it. So there's a whole economy and marketplace. So I think, for business students, if you wanted to be or had an entrepreneur type class, there'd be opportunities to be setting up your own business in Second Life and look at market dynamics or look at the structure of managing a company where the actual real world cost is incredibly minimal.
At the time, 2 things. One, you obviously have quite a facility developed quite a facility with this. It seemed very natural for you to be able to navigate and stuff like that, even though we did have some media problems. But how long did it take you as a professor to get to the point where you had that fluidity with the program?
Well, honestly, I downloaded 8 gigabytes of video tutorials that were made by an employee of Second Life whose avatar name was Torley Linden. And if you go to iTunes, you look at their podcasts and do a search for Second Life, you can download those same ones. And so it was winter, it was a winter break before I taught this class, so fall of 2009. Then over that winter break, I sat with my laptop, played the video tutorials, practiced that in World, and between doing that at night, over winter break, when I didn't have like grading and other stuff I was trying to do, that's where I thought, a lot of facility with object creation, navigation, talking, voice, and the ability to set up, presenting media. So, I would say it's probably 50, 40 hours of dedicated work to learn the diversity of tools that I did. Now, in terms of what the students need to do to go in and be able to sit down, listen to a lecture, be able to do the local chat, I mean, that's what you can do after one workshop.
You created a workshop, you said.
Well, it's the same thing. There's a room, Science 2062, you have a bank of computers, you get the students setting stuff up, you have one screen where you show how to do it, and so.
The second part of that question had to do with actually preparing your lectures for the semester. Apart from becoming capable of manipulating Second Life, you had all this material that you had to assemble and be able to work with as a lecturer. How much, compared to the preparation that you would normally do in a traditional lecture situation, how would you say it compared?
It was about the same. Again, the anatomy and physiology class that I teach here, I teach from PowerPoints because there's a lot of graphic detail that I can't draw, and so it takes. I would take the publisher's prepared PowerPoints that cover each chapter, and I do that for anatomy and physiology, and I did that for this class. And you might sit down for about 20 or 40 minutes per chapter to reorganize the content in the way that I would like to present it. And again, one thing that's important in Second Life is the viewing of the PowerPoint. You try and put larger text per slide. You try and put more information per slide so you're uploading a lot less and manipulating a lot less. So, per chapter, it's probably about 20 to 40 minutes to redo the PowerPoint, but then uploading it was very fast and then teaching it. Now, in terms of when I taught this class on mostly using the chalkboard, I'll say there was relatively minimal preparation involved in teaching it that way.
But presumably, once you've done it once, assuming you're not going to make huge changes, then you're good for a semester or two.
Correct. Yeah, I'm offering this class again this upcoming summer. And hopefully 20 students will sign up for it, at least.
If they can figure out what it is.
Yeah, again, we'll start advertising some more workshops and getting the flyers out there for students to take it again. Again, I had, contemporary biology is a class that gets about 300 or 400 students per fall or spring semester. And we actually, is that about right? Like 200? And so, again, one thing about Second Life is you really can't have more than 40 students at a location at a time, or else it starts acting buggy. So, for this particular course, it's good to try and teach it over the summer, where this class size would typically be somewhere between 20 and 60. But I had originally 40 students signed up a couple days before the semester, and then on Blackboard, I sent out repeated announcements, repeated emails saying, you have to use Second Life and have it on your computer and make an avatar or come to a workshop to be able to take this class, to be able to show up for a class. And the day before, or the day of the first day of classes, the enrollment was 27. So I think those are 13 more students I could have had if they had already had some prior experience with the Second Life course.
Do you have, is it publicized either by Second Life or by the campus or by you as the instructor, what kind of hardware and software students have to have and what kind of connection speed they have to have in order to participate?
Again, we have a website, which I had meant to show earlier. virtualcampus.uno.edu is the gateway for UNO's Second Life campus. And so again, it has ways of navigating to different classrooms. So again, that Slurl, if I wanted to, I could teleport directly there in Second Life. But again, this contains some basic information like what classes are being offered, contacts, student protocol. So again, this is saying, hey, you're going to have to, in order to take a Second Life class at UNO, you have to meet the requirements, and then also, conduct yourself as you would expect to.
No, but I was talking about specifically, what kind of connection speed you have to have, what kind of speed of your computer, what kind of software do you have to have in order,
Oh, right. Okay, so broadband. You have to have broadband. This works pretty well for my home, and I have DSL. In terms of how old a computer you can use, I think you can go back, if you're looking at a high-end computer from 5 or 6 years ago, it'll still work. I have a 4-year-old MacBook, which doesn't have high-end graphics. It still runs version 1 of the client fine. Again, any computer that's probably the past 4 or 5 years will run it pretty reasonably, both Mac or PC. And then the only software you need is just the Second Life client from Second Life. And if you're running a PC, you also need to make sure you download QuickTime to be able to view some of that media. But that's all you need.
and if you have you had students that didn't have hardware that was within the last 4 or 5 years and had a problem with it?
The only technical problem that came up with class was one student who persistently had trouble hearing voice. And we never figured out what that was. So for her, what I really should have done was had her call my office, and I could just put the phone off the hook, and she could have listened to my lectures. Mm-hmm. And I only thought of that like the last day of classes. So I don't know what her problems were in terms of her network or her computer, but students all seem to be able to listen, interact, and connect, and the hardware requirements were pretty low.
And 20 people in a class, that's a lot. It seems like for this kind of interaction.
Yeah, and again, this is a class where, because we do typically have 200-some students, it's either, again, chalkboard or PowerPoint presentations. Again, the publisher includes these MP4s, again, video files that we can show, or MP3s where students listen to it outside of class. And so this makes a good way of delivering, again, taking that type of class into Second Life. So again, we're at 4:30, so we're past 4:30 when we had the room reserved. Somewhat smaller audience than I expected, but thanks for coming. Do you still want to did you want to make an avatar?
No, I don't
Or,
have time.
okay. So otherwise, I will log out. Again, one thing that I attended, I'll make one last thing, is I attended a virtual conference last week. So it's a great way to be able to have a conference, get people interacting, either in voice or giving auditorium type presentations, where again people were all over the world to be able to attend that conference. So again,
You could have done that today.
done what?
Virtual conference today.
Today ended up being a virtual conference. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Sure, you're welcome. Thanks for coming.